Okay, to begin, just take a look at this texture, keep that image in mind, because today we'll be talking about granulating watercolors. It's a word I've heard around, and there are some painters who are attentive to the pigments in their paint, and some enjoy using granulating colors while others don't. Do I normally look into the pigments in my paint, or do I pay attention to which colors are granulating or not? Nope, I don't. Well, up until now, I haven't. Usually I end up just figuring out once I put my paint on paper, and I just keep a mental note of the properties of certain paints, like if there's a paint color I don't like using, or if I don't like how it interacts with other paints. But I figured that there was some good that can come from searching up some information on pigments and granulating colors. So how did I get here to talking about granulating colors? I actually noticed I had some granulating colors on my palette before, but for those pieces where I used those colors, it didn't impact the painting in a way for me to make a fuss about it. This time though, when I started this painting, I was not very enthusiastic for this session. Then I took out my cobalt blue and I placed that first layer over the entire figure. The result was what you saw in the beginning, and I could see the texture as this color dried, and I was legit surprised. This cobalt blue is honestly stunning. The color is beautiful. The texture of that first layer was pretty impressive, and just seeing the texture after doing several paintings with smooth washes, it piqued my interest. Like, why did this paint react this way while others don't? So I decided I figured out, search up some information on granulating colors and share it with you guys. So granulating watercolors are colors that create a speckled kind of texture when it dries. Some artists like the texture granulating colors create, while some others don't because they want a smooth, even texture to their piece. So depending on where you fall, you can choose whether to use granulating colors or not. The reason some paints granulate though is because of the pigment. When it's heavier, the water dries and leaves these clumps, so you get that speckled texture. The reason why some pigments are heavier is that when some natural pigments are ground down, they don't end up as fine, resulting in a heavier pigment and granulation. And while some pigments are just hard to get real fine, so there are going to be colors that will granulate regardless of the brand. And then there's synthetic paints and dyes which don't granulate because they don't need to be ground down. So regardless of the paper you end up using, you can get a smooth wash since it lacks the heavy pigment particles that create the texture. So how do you know if the watercolor paint you're using granulates? You do a swatch and see if you get that speckled texture. And sometimes the manufacturer will label the paint with that for you, so you can look for that. If you love the texture, you can push it even further and use textured watercolor paper, also known as cold press paper. Personally, I don't like using cold press paper. I use hot press since I like the smooth paper, and as much as I do like the smooth paper, I actually also like seeing textured paints. Now, as I said before, there are some paints that will generally granulate across brands just because the pigments typically used for them are just like that, and they tend to be your blue purples like cerulean, ultramarine, Prussian blues, and most cobalt colors, which when I saw that I was like, that's why my cobalt blue granulate anyway. But yeah, those colors. And then there's earth tones and blacks. Blacks can granulate, but it's hard to see sometimes because of how saturated the black is, while generally like your yellows and reds won't granulate. I said generally, you could probably find it somewhere. As for greens, it just depends because you mix yellow and blue to get green, so it depends. Those are just generalities. There will be differences between brands and their makeups of their paints, but even so, reading up on this information was pretty cool. I'll include the titles of the articles I read in the comments if you're interested in reading up on them.